when used to DJ at the mall and I would hear Filipinos in the crowd, I sneak in original Filipino music just to connect with them, right? Someone came up to me and was like, I didn't know our people made this kind of music. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this.
Thank you, Rochelle, for welcoming us with some music, and welcome everyone. This workshop is part of an ongoing series that's supported through a grant that the Oral History Association got from the National Endowment for the Humanities. So I want to say thank you for that funding. And the grant is to support a fellowship program. We had 11 incredible oral historians who were paid for a year to work full-time on anything that they wanted. Can I ask fellows who are here, can you like raise your digital hand so that people can see you, or you can wave if you want to. We're in our last month or so of the fellowship and having a lot of a lot of feelings about wrapping this process up. And this is the second to last workshop in the series. The past workshops are all available through the Oral History Association website. And as we're moving into this final phase, the fellows really asked me to pull together programming that would help them to think about how to share their work with a broad public and how to think about oral history as a collaborative and a creative practice. And so Rochelle Kwan was the absolute first person I thought of who could teach us something really new and valuable about that. So I'm going to introduce her and then I'll hand it over. Rochelle Hoi-Yiu Kwan is a cultural organizer, oral history educator, and DJ whose work aims to equip communities with the tools to get to know their loved ones and build multi-generational art and oral history projects together. And we're going to be able to benefit from some of that today. As an oral history educator, she builds her practice around the belief that we are all storytellers, which I always think of myself as a person who's not a storyteller, actually. So I want to see how I can step into that role. As the community producer at Self-Evident, she leads their growing oral history training and archiving program. I imagine she's going to share it today, but I want to personally shout out their toolkit, which is incredible. She's the storytelling team lead and resident DJ at Think Chinatown, an intergenerational nonprofit based in New York City's Manhattan Chinatown, working at the intersection of storytelling, arts, and neighborhood engagement. She's also worked with partners such as the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, Hunter College Asian American Studies Program, StoryCorps, Red Canary Song, Bulusan Center for Filipino Studies, as well as her own family and neighbors. And in tandem with her oral history work, she takes on her childhood name Yu as an artist and DJ for Chinatown Records, a multi-generational community effort through inherited family record collections, music, and memory. Alongside her family and neighbors, Yu produces Chinatown block parties, sonic family histories, and listening sessions to foster intergenerational dance floors and collaborative art making as powerful acts of resistance and resilience. So I imagine it's extraordinarily clear why we've invited her to share some of her knowledge with us today. Thank you so much, Rochelle, for being with us. Thank you to the Oral History Association for arranging this, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Amy, thank you so much for having me, and to the Oral History Association for bringing me onto this. I know that was a super long bio, and I'm going to dig into all of it a little bit as we move through the workshop today. As you could probably tell, I wear many hats. So I'm really excited to share it with you all today. Yeah, so I'm excited to be here today to share about my work, working alongside my family, my neighbors, a lot of my loved ones from all over, and really digging into how oral histories can be a collaborative art and history making process with all of these people that we love. So I know that Amy gave an amazing intro of me, but I wanted to share a little bit about all of those many hats that I wear. So again, I'm Rochelle Hoi-Yiu Kwan. I am a cultural organizer, an oral history educator, an artist, DJ, a dancer, and in that capacity as a DJ, I've taken on my childhood name, Yu, which is in honor of my family where the project started. And along with all of these many hats, I also am a neighbor, a friend, a daughter, and I mention all of these not just as little identity labels, but because all of these different parts of me relate to each other in the work that I do. And it's pretty clear today because I'm seeing so many friends in the workshop with me today, because all of my work spans across the spectrum. And so I wanted to start off before we really dive in, hearing from y'all. How did you find your way here? How did you find your way to this workshop? How did you find your way to me or any of the work that we've been doing together? I really encourage all throughout the workshop that y'all use the chat function as a place to sprinkle in little memories. Tell me when you're excited. Tell me when a favorite song comes on. Tell me when something that I'm talking about reminds you of somebody that you love, someone you know. Because today in this space, so many of my friends are here. And these are folks, some of y'all know me as a DJ, some of you know me for my oral history work, some of y'all know me as the girl with the bangs in Chinatown who plays music every so often. And it's all of these different hats that I wear that I bring into the work that I do. And it's been a very personal journey. This work is deeply personal to me and has spanned really across so many different parts of my life. And today I'll be sharing so much of my life with you, my very personal life with you. And I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty terrifying, but I am really just, I'm holding on to the fact that so many of my friends, so many of the people that I love, so many of the people that I do this work with are here with me today. They're in the presentation, they're behind me, they're in the room. And so I'm feeling extra brave today. So thank you all for being here with me. And I'm really glad that y'all found your way to me and to us. Okay. And then before we really dive in, I wanted to hear a little bit about why you all are even here today. It could be that you like music. It could be that you're just curious about what I always am talking about with all of these crazy projects that I'm working on. And I'd love to hear from folks in the chat just to see why you're here. Because I feel like there's so many different reasons that folks can make their way here. And one of the reasons that I'm really bringing in friends from all across these different worlds is because I know that the work that we do in oral history, in music, in having conversations, it's present and spread all across these different worlds. They may look different wherever, in whatever setting that we're in, but I know they're there. And so today is really about tuning in to these stories, tuning into how we can really tune our radio dials just perfect so we can start to hear these stories, start to hear the people that have been around us for so long. And when we're also tuning into the people around us, it's also important for us to tune in to the person who's listening and that's you. So I know a lot of times we think about oral history just as the storyteller. Like we just think that we're here to interview the storyteller and all that we're hearing is the stories coming from that person. But we do have to remember that we are the ones asking the questions. We play a key role in really facilitating those stories and really bringing out those stories. And one of the ways that we do that is by building the trust for people to feel safe and brave enough to share. And so that's how I kind of feel today is like, I feel like I'm the storyteller and y'all are the interviewers. And I feel like y'all are making me feel brave and safe enough to share these very personal parts of me today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of all of this with me. So just to be very, very clear, I'm not here to tell you today how to get your loved ones to talk to you, because every one of us has a very different relationship with our loved ones, and we're at different levels of comfort and trust with them. But what I am here to do today is really get us to start thinking about, why is it that you even want to talk with them? How can these conversations look? How can they get started? And also, what are some really dope examples of ways that you can collaborate with your loved ones? What can you create together? What can you make together? And so today there's going to be a lot of listening. So there's music, there's history, there's family stories. So I do recommend that wherever you are in the world, get yourself nice and cozy, because I think listening is way more personal and interactive than we think. And you never know, memories and feelings may pop up that you didn't expect. And like I said at the beginning, please feel free to really go in on the chat, because I want to hear when folks are excited. I want to hear when folks are reminded of someone that they love. I also want to hear when y'all hear a favorite song or think of your favorite song, because you never know, someone else in here might have the same favorite song as you. All right, so let's dive in. Okay, so as I was sharing before, I wear a lot of different hats. And the reason that I do is because, to me, oral history is a holistic process. It's a continuous cycle where I'm constantly learning, growing, and evolving my work with the people around me. It's something that I am constantly learning from the teachers all around me, from my family to my neighbors to other DJs, and all of these things that I learn from the people around me make this whole oral history process collaborative, and it allows for me to have trial and error. I am here to acknowledge that I am not a perfect oral historian. I don't think that exists. And I think a good oral historian is one who is open to continuing to learn and to adapt and continuing to adjust to the people around them. And so today I'm here to talk about my oral history process, which I break down into 3 big steps. So the first is to listen, then we learn how to do oral histories, and then we activate them. So each of these steps I'm going to break down, and lucky for y'all, each of these steps has one of the projects that I work on, and then you'll start to see how they all really tie in together with each other. So before we do that, though, I would love for y'all to think back to the last time that someone told you a story about themselves. It could be any story, and I want you to think about, who were you with? What were you doing? Where were you? And yeah, picture that scene. Where in the world were you? Who were you with? And what were these stories that you were hearing? feel free to drop it in the chat. I know that for me, here are some recent places where I had last heard stories. And I share all of these photos and all of these people with you because I think that a lot of times we think of oral histories and histories in general as only meant to document the most extraordinary people with the most extraordinary stories. They're so famous, they've accomplished so much, and so they deserve to be documented and remembered for forever. And so when we have this idea of history, because we see it in celebrities, we see it in our history books, we see it in museums as these extraordinary stories, it makes sense to think that we will go out only to seek out these extraordinary people with extraordinary stories and think that oral history is only meant for them. I think oftentimes we think of oral histories as these official interviewers coming into communities, coming into places to seek out these extraordinary stories. And in doing that, they're really only listening to what they want to hear. They think it's extraordinary, so they only want to hear about that. But in reality, those extraordinary people can be the ones closest to us. Here are a lot of photos of my neighbors, my family, people that I get to see every single day, people that come to block parties, people I have dinner with. And these extraordinary people have extraordinary stories. And you don't have to go that far. They're right next to me, they're right behind me. And these are people that you can already have relationships with. These are people that you can continue to grow your relationships with by getting to know them and getting to know these stories. And so this really goes back to the really core belief in all of my work is that we are all storytellers. Every day that we're living our lives, there are stories that come up that get us from day to day. It's, I walked to work today, or I had a sandwich today and it was amazing and it rocked my world. You know, these tiny stories, they may not feel extraordinary, but they get us, like I said, from day to day. And that is extraordinary, that we're still here and that we're still going. And as we're moving through our day-to-day lives, we're constantly having conversations with people, whether it's the person at the bus stop, or it's someone that I'm having dinner with, or it's my coworker, as somebody was saying in the chat here. And in these conversations, we're learning every single day, not only about the stories that these people hold, but also actually how to interact with people, how to really learn to be a better friend, a better neighbor, so that we can understand and facilitate these stories. And so I think that every day we are gathering these stories, and these histories don't just live in museums. They live in our homes, they live in our neighborhoods, they live in our communities. And we're continuing to pass on this knowledge. And so when we think about oral history as an institution, we can think of these stories that we're gathering in our everyday lives, not in opposition to these mainstream ideas of oral history, but instead, these little tinier stories that we're gathering every single day, they start to fill in the gaps of these institutional narratives of history. And it's through these personal connections within our communities and with our loved ones that we can start to get an even fuller picture of these larger histories. And so with these people that I love, I am so honored to be able to continue to deepen my relationships with them, learn these histories together with them, and see my communities and my neighborhoods as my classrooms, as my inspiration, and see these people as my teachers. And so today is really a place for us to think about how can we start tuning in to all of these teachers, all of these collaborators, all of these storytellers all around us, and really start to facilitate those stories that really make up these larger histories all around us. And so I think a great way to tune in and really listen is to start with the Chinatown Records Project. So the Chinatown Records is a musical exploration of Chinatown through inherited family record collections, neighborhood block parties, and all of the memories that come with them. It's led by me, my family, my neighbors, and every person who has ever danced through our block parties, listened to radio shows, or donated their record collections to me, or just told me about their favorite song. It started officially back in 2020 when I was having lunch with my neighbor, who is a retired filmmaker here in Manhattan's Chinatown. I was telling him about how I had inherited some Chinese records from my dad, and he looked at me and said, "I didn't know that you liked records, especially Chinese records. So why don't you take my grandfather's collection? It's been sitting in my apartment for the past few decades. I also have an extra turntable. I have a mixer. So now you can be a DJ for everyone. Good luck." And so that's how I not only started inheriting all these records, but how I became a DJ. It just literally landed in my lap. Since 2020, word spread. Once folks found out that there is a poor sucker who wants Chinese records, folks have been coming to me. They've been referring friends to me. And since then, I've inherited 17 collections of records and CDs and cassettes from my neighbors, from my family members, all the way to my childhood dentist. And all of these records and CDs and collections had been sitting in folks' homes for the past few decades, whether it's their own collection or it's their grandparents' collection or it's their dad's collection. And they didn't really know what to do with them. And they just knew that they couldn't throw them away. And now they have found someone to bring them home with them so that they can be played out again. And so it's been a really, really special project that has been constantly evolving as new collections come in, as block parties happen, as people tell me about their favorite songs. And so although the project officially started in 2020 with this first collection from my neighbor, I do think actually that there are quite a few unofficial origin stories and clues about this project long before that. Some of these clues include my parents hosting karaoke parties at home with their friends, singing canto pop all night long. Listening to music in the car with my family on my way to school. In 2018, when I moved to New York, I accidentally dropped something on the side of our couch in our family home. And when I moved the couch aside, I suddenly found my dad's entire record collection, which had been sitting there for over 20 years, never knew it was there. And when I asked him about it, he said, "Well, I didn't know that you liked records or you liked Chinese music." And he's right. But before I left for New York, he said, "You know, you can pick out a few and that'll be a little gift from me to remind you of home." Another unofficial origin story is in 2019 when I went to Hong Kong for the very first time with my family. I didn't know anything about Chinese records at that time, but I knew that that was a site for these records. And so I was talking to my dad's childhood best friend about them. And on the last day, they gave me a stack of records. And finally, in 2020, when one morning I woke up in Chinatown and heard a really familiar song coming from my window, and that was the first time that I was like, I know I've heard this song before, and dug through the collections and finally listened to my dad's records and found that song. And I tell you all of these unofficial origin stories, not just because I love remembering these stories, but which I do, but I also think that these unofficial origin stories are actually lots of little seeds for the project, long before its official start in 2020. And these stories were here all along, and maybe I just wasn't listening. And so one of the big examples of me not listening is I have, I've had my grandma or my papa in my life, my entire life. But it wasn't until 2019 when I came back from Hong Kong and realized that, wow, I do not know any Cantonese, and I should really practice with someone who would actually talk to me in Cantonese. And so every week I started calling my grandma and just to say hi. And so for about a year with my very broken Cantonese, we had the same conversation every time. How are you? I'm good. Are you eating? Yes. Good. Okay, bye. That was it. And even though the conversations kind of felt the same every single time, it also felt like there was a kind of listening that was happening. A kind of listening that I honestly didn't do with her throughout my life. And this kind of listening was actually calling her and being there with her, even from afar. It was listening through showing that I wanted to spend time with her, that I wanted to get to know her, even in this broken Cantonese that I was trying to attempt. And so one day I called her as usual, and finally, and she said, we did our normal conversation. I'm eating. Yes, I'm good. I'm good. And then she said to me, so why are you calling me? Do you want to know about how I came to the US or not? And I was like, I have been waiting this whole time to learn about this. And so she ended up telling me her entire immigration story here to the US. And I knew that this story was always present, but I never quite knew how to get there. And so from there, as we started talking more and more, our relationship started to grow, and we started to actually talk about our lives from the past to the present. And then fast forward to 2020, when I started inheriting all of these records from Chinatown folks. I didn't know anything about this music. I only had those faint memories from home that my parents would have on in the car or at karaoke parties. And so, of course, I asked my grandma if she knew any of this music, and she almost was offended that I asked her if she knew about music. And she said, of course I know about this music. Of course I had tapes. What do you mean I didn't know about music? And so here's a little snippet of my papa telling me about these tapes.
事關他早拋開怯懦，無非是為愛我，實在愛我。
我以前喺屋企，我會聽㗎嘛，我有好多嗰啲錄音帶啊呢度，我又唔識聽呢啲嘅，所以我聽翻香港嘅我好咗。我而家我都成日都聽㗎，我哋一路接聽佢哋一路唱啊，咁我咪又跟住唱下咁樣咯。
是愛他生於天蠍座。
And since then, as I started to get more and more into this music, music has really become a bridge for us into these bigger, tougher conversations. She started telling me about how this music was a way that she adjusted to living here in the US. When she missed speaking Cantonese or hearing Cantonese, she would listen to this music to remind her of home. And as we were diving into these conversations, she started to ask me about my life. There we go. She started to ask me about my life, what I was doing. She asked me about the block parties. She asked me what music I've been listening to. And now every time I call, she asks me, are you out dancing right now? And it's like a regular weekday evening. And it made me realize that just as much as I was asking her about her past life, she also wanted to know about mine too. And so we started sharing stories about dancing, about music. And one of my favorite stories that she's told me is this video that I'm about to show y'all. And I hope y'all enjoy this one.
咁你喺屋企唱歌嗰陣時，係咪自己跳舞㗎？
自己跳舞？
係啊。
冇啊，我淨係聽歌咋。
咁你以前後生嗰陣時，你有冇出去跳舞啊？
我以前我未同你同工結婚嘅時候咧，我有個男朋友係康康佢嘅大學嘅 party 啊，經常見到我着啲紅嘅顏色嘅裙，咁我咪有跟佢去咯。你又去跳舞啊？開開心心不必顧忌。
And so as we've been sharing these stories, I realized that it's actually become a two-way street. It's not just now me as this young person asking my grandma, like, tell me everything. She also has been telling me these, and she's also been asking me about what I've been doing in my life. We've been connecting that I still do dance, but she used to dance all the time when she was out in Hong Kong. And you know, sometimes she also passes messages along to my mom through me. And so, you know, I started telling my mom about these stories about her mom, and my mom was saying, well, I'd never heard these stories before. And I was like, me neither. And so as I was starting to tell my mom about these stories, she was like, you know, I used to dance too. And I also love this music. And turns out that my mom, my grandma, and I all share a favorite singer. Her name is Anita Mui or Mu Yingfeng. And it turns out that we all love to sing too.
I remember there was one time we'd all gone to bed, and then I heard the piano playing. I snuck out of my room and I was hiding behind the doorway into the living room. You had your songbook and you were singing and playing in the middle of the night. And I sat there listening to you from behind the wall.
I didn't know that. I love to sing. Singing is my thing too. And I kind of have to keep it aside after I went to school and I got married and everything. But then I see it in you. When I see you sing, just said, look, this is my girl, enjoying life, enjoying singing like what I would love to sing.
And so
I remember there was one time.
As I'm starting to hear these stories, I'm actually starting to get to know my mom and my grandma, not just as my mom and my grandma, but also as a young woman that they were long before I was even thought of. And there was a time recently that my grandma was showing me pictures of herself when she was young, and she called herself Ayi, which is auntie. And I was like, who are you talking about? And she's like, me. Before I was your grandma, I wasn't auntie. I was just a regular girl. And I was like, wow, you're right. You are not always my grandma. And so sometimes I imagine being the DJ back then for when my grandma and my mom were dancing through Hong Kong as young women. And actually recently, I had the deep honor of DJing with my mom dancing beside me. And so it actually came true. And so I share all of this because as sudden as it felt that I became a DJ and all of this landed in my lap, as I started to talk to my family about these stories, about this music, I realized that this didn't actually come out of, and this didn't come out of nowhere. My family had passed on this love for music, this love for dancing, for singing, and I realized that this work was deeply rooted in that. It was not just suddenly popped out of nowhere. And it's been a project that has allowed for me to connect with my family across generations. It has completely changed my relationship with my family, not just through the stories that I know about them, but actually how I interact with them, how I get to know them, and how I can stay connected with them even from afar. And so for me, this Chinatown Records project has not ever just been about the music or about becoming a DJ, but it's actually been a way for me to connect with my family in a way that I had never, ever imagined. And so beyond just my own family, this project has also been about opening up this space for other people to start doing the same with their families, through music. I want other people to feel this warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing that their families used to be young people and lived lives just like, just as exciting as we are living. I wanted folks to start listening and remembering with their families, whether it's around the dinner table, in their living rooms, or at neighborhood block parties. And I want us to start reimagining where these stories and this music lives, where it can live, beyond just the traditional oral history interview, and also beyond the traditional DJing settings of the clubs or the bars. Where has music always lived? Where have these stories always lived? And for me, music has always lived in the car when we're driving to school, in karaoke, in our living rooms. And so with all this music and with all of these stories, whenever I share radio shows with people, I strongly encourage them to listen with their parents. And a lot of times I've had folks come back to me and say, I put on a radio show while I was having dinner with my family, and that was the first time I ever heard my mom say anything about music. She suddenly started singing every word to this song, and she told me about why she liked this song. And to me, that is why I do this work with Chinatown Records. It's about opening up this space, using music as a bridge into these harder conversations that we may not have been able to start opening quite yet. And now we also are creating new memories together with this music. And so as people are starting to hear these stories from their families, they're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I want to document these stories. I want to remember them forever. And so I want us to think about, like, who is someone in your life that you've always wanted to get to know? Why do you want to get to know them? And what has stopped you from doing so before? And feel free to drop it into the chat. I know that as I started sharing all of these family histories, especially through music, so many people started reaching out to me asking if I would come in and have a conversation with their family members, if I could teach them how to have these conversations so that they could, you know, learn about these histories within their own families. And so it made me realize that, you know, people they want to do this. They want to learn how to have these conversations that I am so lucky to be able to have with my family. And so this moves me to the next step in this oral history process, which is to learn. And as Amy was talking about right at the beginning with the intro, I have been super lucky to be working with a group called Self-Evident. I have been working as the community producer with this. Well, now we're a storytelling platform, but initially founded in 2019. It was initially conceived as a podcast to share Asian American stories with a focus on everyday experiences. So right up my alley. And since then, it has really grown into a platform to really build up our emerging storytellers, whether they're professional journalists, emerging storytellers, oral historians, or just folks who just want to learn how to talk to their family members. And at the time, I was working to grow our listening party program, which was meant to bring people together in conversation about our episodes. And while we were doing that, we were hearing from so many of our educator friends asking us to come into the classrooms to talk about how to conduct these oral histories, how to have these conversations. And so we really started connecting the dots. And we realized that it wasn't just that people were looking to know how to click record on their recorder and have these conversations recorded. People were actually already trying to have these conversations with their loved ones. But they needed a little bit of extra help to fine-tune those skills to really bring their loved ones into the process. And so this is where our oral history program starts, with the idea that oral history is for everyone, from first-time storytellers to experienced oral historians. We were really aiming to equip folks with the tools to have these meaningful conversations with their loved ones, tell their own stories, preserve their community's histories, and also be able to learn from this vast range of stories from all across the spectrum of Asian America. And so we were super, super excited to be supported by Luce Foundation to launch our pilot oral history program. And together, led by me, together with a dear friend, Jen Ng, who was our UX researcher and designer, our Self-Evident team, an incredible team of advisors spanning from educators, archivists, community organizers, all the way to research with educators and learners and community members. We were able to build this pilot oral history program. And it includes an oral history toolkit, which I'm going to dive into in just a little bit, to equip folks with the tools to do these recordings and have these conversations with their loved ones. Then after folks went through the toolkit, they could actually conduct these interviews and then upload them into our story archive so that they could see their histories being placed into an archive alongside other stories. And from there, we're hoping to continue to share these stories and really activate them so that we can use them to continue learning about our histories, creating curriculum, producing art, radio shows, media, all sorts of things. So today I'm really going to focus on our oral history toolkit to really dive into how we can learn to conduct these oral histories with our loved ones so that we can do them together. So this oral history toolkit is a deep labor of love, and it was designed with both educators and our learners in mind. It is totally free. It is a digital toolkit online that you can access at any time. And this is with the deep belief that these oral histories are already happening, that communities should have these tools, have these skills to be able to have these conversations with their loved ones, deepen those relationships, and preserve their own communities' histories. And so we designed this toolkit to be flexible for our educators so that they can adapt it as they need to build it into the curriculum. We also made sure that it was flexible for our learners so that folks can work at their own pace, because we know that everybody's busy. And we wanted this toolkit to be able to be used by folks from all experience levels, from first-time storytellers to experienced oral historians who are trying to polish up on their skills, or they want to learn how to really center their storytellers and their narrators in the process of their oral histories. We also built this program specifically for folks to not need any fancy equipment. They don't need a recording studio. They don't need any fancy microphones. If you've got a phone that you can record things on, you're set. You've got all the equipment you need. And with each lesson in this toolkit, there is one step of the oral history process. Each lesson includes a video lesson from me. So basically a nice little personal workshop with me. And it tells you exactly how long the lesson is. It gives you a full lesson outline, a transcript of the entire video lesson, video subtitles, and assignments at the end of each lesson, so you can start building up all the materials that you need for your oral history interview. And then if you're still curious to learn more within each lesson, there are even additional resources for you to continue to be inspired and continue to learn. And so by the end of all of the lessons, we hope that you will have all of the relationships building skills, all of the technical recording skills to create your own oral histories with your loved ones. In addition to the toolkit lessons themselves, we also acknowledged that the toolkit is only the foundation. Every person, every project is different, and so specific questions will come up. And so we were hosting open office hours for our pilot contributors to jump in anytime that they had a question about the toolkit, about uploading their interview into the archive. And so one of the folks that we had, one of our pilot contributors that we had in this pilot program was Alex Ho. And he came into office hours after he tried a first interview with his mom. It didn't go super well because he couldn't really quite figure out how to keep the conversation flowing. He couldn't, he was having some trouble and felt stuck. And so when he came in, I suggested to him that for me in the past, it has helped to use photos, use objects, use music as jumping off points for stories. And I'm super excited to share that a few weeks later, Alex came back in super excited after trying again with his mom. And he brought one of her favorite songs that he remembered hearing when he was a kid. And he had this beautiful conversation with his mom, and I wanted to share a short 5-minute snippet of this conversation that he had.
the little mountain we talked about first, Guanyin San.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you can hear the whole team singing all the way to the mountain because it's not as high, right? And the air is abundant, so you don't feel like you run out of breath. So you can sing.
What do you sing?
What do you sing? They always have some marching songs. Back in Taiwan, we have military services, so they sing those marching songs, or even like kids songs.
Well, that brings me to our last topic. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about music, and so I wanted to ask you, where do you remember hearing music when you're growing up?
I'm just not, into like crazy about singing myself. Yeah.
I remember you saying that you didn't have a record player at home, but your friends had record players.
Right.
Was your friends' houses some of the first times you got to hear a lot of popular music?
No, we do have a radio at home, okay? And you turn on the radio, you hear the songs, right? People singing. But sometimes I just feel like, I even feel like, it's my parents. My parents want to be quiet. They'll make sure we only study, okay? We don't forget about study, and then just because if you sing, you forgot what you learned. So that's why I think you're right. I'm like mute to a lot of musics, a lot of songs, right? Even some schoolmates, elementary schools, they sing the popular songs, and we always feel like, she will fail the schoolwork because she sings too much songs. So anyway, that's weird, right? To you?
No, it's not weird. Kind of, even me growing up, that's kind of the role of popular music a lot of times, is the fun leisure time outside of maybe the serious thing that you're doing. And in the case of, I know we were talking earlier, your family education was pretty important. So yeah.
Yeah. So if you really think about, ask me, when did I start really listen more? I started like to hear Taiwanese or Chinese song more only after I came to this country. Okay. At home, you say, how can I hear them, right? I do, because I have my cousins send me tapes, cassette tapes, and the tapes would have, some famous singers, Deng Lijun, or Cui Taiqing, Xia Taifeng, a lot of those singers of my age, This is Taiwanese song, okay? We have more than just Taiwanese, we have Chinese songs. All kind of songs, all kind of songs. Anyway, but this one, when you hear it, feels so really homesick, because this is Taiwanese, right? Okay, and here we don't, especially when you work, the whole day, you speak in English. You feel like, I don't want to speak English anymore. So at home you do, I want to hear some Taiwanese, you want to hear some Chinese, and you turn on the music and you hear that, right? I don't think when you were little, you don't like this song either, because they're different, right? They're very slow, very soft. I remember when I hum some songs, you said, ugh, strange. You probably don't remember that, but so it just we feel connections to those songs, right? But you don't. Yeah.
I have to say though, the memory of these songs when I was very little, and hearing you even sing them along with them when I was very little, is nostalgic to me too. And so it took me back, remembering you singing those songs when I was little.
I don't remember that part. Okay, I only remember you sing a lot of Disney's movie songs. I'm glad now we connected now. You more into the Chinese song too.
Well, it's just interesting to
I have
reflect.
to learn,
Yeah.
I want to learn some American songs too.
When I listen to this conversation, I know it's Alex's mom talking, but I can just hear my mom saying the same things to me. I'm sure they were tired of hearing all the Disney songs that I was listening to when I was a kid too. And so when Alex came back with this conversation, he was so excited. He was so stoked that like he finally was able to really have this conversation, going through the toolkit and using these little clues, music and little objects to get to know his mom. And he said that these are stories that he had never ever heard before. He never knew this about his mom. And so I share this story not only to share how exciting it is for Alex that he finally had to have this conversation, but it makes me think about, well, so now we have this recording. I know as a listener who was not part of the actual interview that I feel a deep connection to it. It felt like I was hearing my mom saying that to me. So now we have this recording, this raw recording. What do we do with it? How can we get folks to also be able to hear it? How can we get folks to also feel the feelings that I feel about listening to it, or the feelings that Alex feels listening to it? Because a lot of times, this is a 5-minute clip that I shared with you all from a full 1-hour interview. And for a lot of people, you probably won't listen to the full hour-long interview. Especially for folks where archives feel inaccessible, whether it's a digital archive and you just see a list of names that you don't even know, or going into an institutional archive, you need a student ID, you need a research ID. A lot of folks don't feel comfortable going in there. And so how do we get these recordings from out of these dusty archives? How do we get the folks to be able to engage with them, to learn from them, to feel from them, and to really tell even more stories? I'm so glad y'all asked, because the last step in this oral history process is to activate these stories, is to really bring them out of the archives and bring them into spaces where people can actually engage with them. They can hear them, they can see them, they can relate to them. And so this brings me to my work as the storytelling lead at Think Chinatown, which is a place-based intergenerational nonprofit in Manhattan's Chinatown. Our work is at the intersection of storytelling, arts, and neighborhood engagement. It was founded in 2016 by a group of neighbors who basically just kept running into each other at community events. And since then, we have been using art and stories together to really highlight and reimagine these stories. Because when we're able to bring these stories out of the archive and bring them in front of other people, these stories can live many, 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 many lives. And I like to think of the oral history interview as just the seed for many more conversations, for many more connections to come. When we see stories not only highlighted, but also reimagined by artists, by our neighbors, by our loved ones, and our storytellers see this, we're really honoring our storytellers. We're telling them, hey, we're listening and we love your story and we love what we're learning. We love how we feel when we hear the stories. And so with our work at Think Chinatown, we take these stories and we bring on artists to commission pieces and reimagine these stories. So this can look like animations, this can look like documentary films, this can look like sculptures in the neighborhood that that are at the places that these stories take place. And seeing these pieces, seeing these stories all around the neighborhood, in the theater, in events, we want our storytellers to see that we love them, we love their stories matter. And we also want these stories to be able to inspire others to feel brave enough to share their stories too. And so when we bring folks together into these listening sessions, we're able to really learn these stories together. We're listening and learning histories together, but we're also using these stories as jumping off points for even more stories to come. So one of the big examples of how we do this is with our landmarks project at Think Chinatown. It's a storytelling project that brings in our neighbors to talk about some of their personal landmarks here in Chinatown. We combine memories that they have of the place. We combine actual sounds, so it feels like when you're listening, you're walking into this place with them. And then we commission artists to create pieces of art inspired by these stories. And then we plant these art pieces around the neighborhood in Chinatown so that people can walk by them in their day-to-day lives, know that this place existed, know that there is history here. And then it doesn't stop there. And then we bring folks in to have these listening sessions and workshops where we pull up this map. And we ask folks, all right, where do y'all want to go today? What stories do you want to hear? What place do you want to go to? And people pick where we get to go, whether it's a Cantonese opera performance, or it's a lion dance crew, a family association, a bakery. And from there, after we hear these stories, I couldn't get people to stop telling me their personal memories of that place. And then at the end, after we've gone through this map together, we asked folks to actually bring items with them from the neighborhood that remind them of special places. And we had this workshop where folks were telling each other and sharing these items with each other and talking about these really special places that they love and they want others to know about. And so when we are able to see these stories and hear these stories together, it brings out even more stories. The stories never stop. And it also allows for us to see that we're not the only ones that are experiencing this. We start to see connections in our memories across time, across generations. And so I'm excited to share this next piece with you that really hits this all the way home of connecting and seeing these connections across generations, across time. This is a very, very special piece for me, and it's called An Ode to Our Generations, Remembering the Music and Memories of Yellow Pearl and Basement Workshop. This is a piece that is deeply inspired and rooted in Basement Workshop, which was an arts and culture organizing group here in Manhattan's Chinatown in the 60s and 70s. It was a critical part of the Asian American movement, the Third World Liberation Movement, and the seed for so much of the work that we do here today at Think Chinatown. And in 1972, the Basement Workshop, they published an art book called Yellow Pearl. It was originally a project that was meant to illustrate the music of Chris Ajima, Nobuko Miyamoto, and Charlie Chin. But it grew into a 57-page compilation of writing, art, and music by over 30 Asian American artists. And so in this really special piece, we bring together one of my closest friends and multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, Trey Lamb, to perform songs from Yellow Pearl, intertwined with memories from a conversation between me, Treya, Yin Kong, who's the director of Think Chinatown, and also Arlen Huang, who was one of the co-coordinators of Yellow Pearl, talking about the memories and our work here in the neighborhood as artists and activists from the past all the way through today. So I hope y'all enjoy. This video is about 10 minutes long, so settle in, get cozy, because there's a lot of feelings that are going to come out with this one.
Do you remember that first time that you walked into basement?
Yes, I do.
Can you walk us through it as if we were right next to you?
A grain. A tiny grain of sand landing in the belly of the monster. And time is telling only how long it takes. Layer after layer, as its beauty unfolds, as its captor, it holds in peril a grain. A tiny grain of sand.
First of all, it was in the basement on Elizabeth Street. The minute I walked in, I mean, it was like packed with people. There's really no room. Things were just crates, doors on crates, in this sort of this musty, you know how basements smell. When Rocky called the meeting to order, I think the first thing he said was, we need someone to take over as the project leader. And for whatever reason, I said, okay, I could do it. And then Takashi said he could do it too. And that's how we became co-coordinators of Yellow Pearl.
And I am a yellow pearl, and you are a yellow pearl. We are yellow pearl, and we are half the world, and we are half the world.
The first few meetings with the people of Yellow Pearl, most of them were very happy to be meeting. Most of them were the only Asian Americans in their schools. So it was kind of a revelation to be talking to other people who look like you. Basement became a real magnet. And you got to show up at all these events.
Can you tell us what these events were like?
It usually revolved around poetry reading with music, usually around Chris and Joanne and Charlie.
Like, who was showing up?
The same people. It's just like one party, just like you guys, right? I see all you guys at the same events, right? Different events. Oh, there they are.
We have other random people come too.
Yeah, and then you have random people, and then they're interested, and then, you know, that's how other people join. Just like you guys, right? You know, you're at a meeting, and you say, we're going to do the music. And then as things go, hey, why don't we do poetry? Oh, we could get graphics for every poetry and every song. Yeah, that sounds great. And because, you know, you're all like 19, 20, 21 years old, you know, you say, we'll find a way. We got time. And that's how it happens. You know that.
Will hold in peril.
Yellow Pearl was an audacious time. Revolution was really possible.
A grain.
And people were down for doing everything and anything. And you just do it.
A tiny grain of sand.
No fear.
I knew there was something about me today.
We decided it's going to be loose leaf. We laid out all the sheets and then we just went and collated each box. When you talk about an album, a piece of music, Yellow Pearl, it's just evidence that, hey, you know, this happened. That year happened in 1970, 1971. So these things are important for that.
I know that at Think Chinatown, we think a lot about the work that we're building with our communities. We're creating these artifacts for ourselves. And it sounds like Yellow Pearl really was an artifact of that time.
I sort of began to come to terms with different aspects of my identity. The thing that was the most challenging to embrace was, I guess, like the Asian American part. Papa was like the only person that I spoke Cantonese with, and that was my first language. In 2015, my mother passed away, and in 2016, my grandmother passed away. So I started coming to Chinatown just to hear people speak the language because I was afraid to lose it. And part of how I thought I would try to connect with that was through music. So late in the middle of the night, one day, I just Googled Asian American folk, and I found this record called A Grain of Sand. I listened to that record exclusively for a while. Yeah, I was so surprised when I heard it because it was just really wild to already feel like a connection to the sounds. I've always felt like I've had to pave my own way and figure things out on my own. And this was the first time that I was there's a chain, there's a legacy, there's this connection that I didn't even realize.
I knew there was something different about me today.
I'd known about the Yellow Pearl for a while, and I've always been curious about it. And then I was just thinking, why can't we also make, something too? I'm always erring on the side of just do it rather than let's wait for the perfect moment to do it because that may never come.
There's something that feels really urgent and fleeting to preserve. It's a leap of faith of this is what feels like I should pursue. And there's no one way to be a part of this. And it's necessary to recognize the differences and the different roles. It means something that other people are also feeling that inclination too. So let's just go for it.
Who we really are.
But I think it's also important from our generation's point, because we have the foundation that was laid from the previous generation, to take things a step further and to also consider longevity. So finding balance, keep things steadily continuing.
We are the children of the migrant worker. We are the offspring of the concentration camp. Sons and daughters of the railroad builders who leave their stamp on America.
When I hear people talk about basement, there was this feeling of we were just doing it. There was so much excitement for this work, and people were bringing themselves and contributing what they had to build something, even if people didn't know exactly what it was going to turn out to be. People were really excited to be a part of something together, and that's how I think of our work at Think too. So many different people came with all of these different skills and excitement. We just all kind of find a place to fit that in, and it sounds like Basement was a lot of that too.
Sing a song for ourselves.
Yeah, I see it happening with Think Chinatown. It's a special thing when buzz happens. You really can't define it. You can't make it. And when it's real buzz, you can feel it. I'm feeling it right now. And man, that's good.
Through this project, we got to meet each other, and we're here at this table across generations creating together. It's not just I know about you, but I actually get to know you as a person.
Did you think you'd be talking about Yellow Pearl this far into the future when you made it?
No, not at all. Well, you know, I see history as cylindrical. It's not from past to future. It goes up and it spirals up. So things happen as you go around. Things never repeat, but you bump into the same things along the way, and they're all different. And if I think that Yellow Pearl was it, you're stuck in the past. What a journey. It's just starting, really, right?
I feel like it's gonna be a long path, so I wanna just like be ready for it.
It's your time, and it is the best time.
Audacious time. It's our audacious time.
Oh, it's great hanging out with you guys.
Aww. We love hanging out with you too.
Haven't you seen those pictures?
No, actually, no.
You haven't?
No.
Here you go.
Oh my God.
That's me and Lillian. And that's
Oh
basement.
My God.
Wow, the glasses.
The flow. Oh.
That's amazing.
I'm now
Wow.
going to story how you and Lillian met.
I tear up every time I watch that video. I'm pretty sure I saw Lillian pop in here not too long ago, so she's in here somewhere. Yeah, so this is, like I said, a really, really, really special piece to me because it's not only it's not only you know, a time capsule about Think Chinatown or about Basement Workshop or Yellow Pearl, but it's a memory box of our friendships with these people. These are our neighbors, these are our friends, and you know, the folks that I'm so lucky to be able to build all of this work with. They're not just storytellers to me. They're my neighbors. They're my friends. And I know that I'm seeing in the chat here that there are lots and lots of friends here who know Lillian, who know Arlen, and so. All of this is to say that, you know, these stories continue to live on. They don't just stay in the past. They don't just stay in archives, but when we have the chance to actually activate them, share them with other people, they can live so many more lives, both in the stories that we tell, but also in the work that we do today. And so I am really excited to share this particular slide that I'm going to say I did not make this slide, but this is a slide that was pulled directly from a presentation put together by an artist, a public artist, activist that I have admired all throughout my work, named Tomia Arai. You saw a lot of her illustrations in that last video. She's in both of these pictures. And when I went to go see her give a presentation, one of the last slides that popped up was this one, where she compared Basement Workshop in 1972 to Think Chinatown today. 50 years apart. And for me, this really shows that when we're able to not only activate these stories, but actually have the space to talk about them with each other, we're able to learn from each other. We're able to build on each other's work and continue to grow and evolve these histories together and continue to grow and evolve our work together. And so I'm excited for 50 years from now when there will be a third photo added to this slide. Who knows? I'm excited to see what I will look like 50 years from now and to see a lot of my friends in all of these photos. And so in all of this work, we're able to create these memories and create stories together. And so this brings me back to listening again, because all of these stories keep coming as we have the space to activate these stories and share these stories, build these connections and see these connections. More stories will keep coming, and it'll just never stop. And that is why I think that oral history is an ever-growing cycle, an ever-growing process where when we're continuing to tune into the people around us, this wide range of people that may not be in traditional oral history archives, but have been incredible teachers in our lives, the stories will never stop. Just as our conversations will never stop. And so to me, oral history doesn't just start and end with the interview. Its impact stretches far beyond and before the actual interview. And that's what makes this work so exciting and meaningful to me, is that I'm always learning something new with the people around me, not just in the stories that they share, but also learning how to be a better friend, a better neighbor, a better daughter, storyteller, DJ, oral historian. I'm constantly learning and constantly reshaping how we do this work, because all along the way, as folks are believing in me and trusting me and teaching me, we are collaborating on this incredible oral history process. And that makes it so meaningful to me to be able to share it with the people I love and people that I will love. And so before I wrap up and open up the space for folks to ask questions, I did want to leave you with one final piece. This is a conversation with my dad, and it features one of our favorite singers, George Lam, or Lam Zicheng. And our household was a Lam Zicheng household. Like, this was the person that I will always remember his voice, no matter where I am in the world. And this particular clip is from a radio show that I did together with my family. And I always hold this clip very, very close to my heart, to always remind me where it all started and why I do this work with the people that I love. So I hope you all enjoy.
Label them where they came from, and so you have a story to tell in the future.
I know that you label all of yours. You write your initials and the date on all of them.
Yep. Yeah. It may not mean anything right now, but in the future, then when you look back, put those days and times on it, it means a lot.
So thank you so much for all of you all for being here, for being a part of this work with me, and for making me feel brave enough to share today such a personal part of my life. And so I do absolutely encourage y'all to stay connected with me, and come be a part of this work with us. The only reason that it happens is because of all of y'all and all of the folks that believe in me and teach me all along the way. So I hope to see you all soon. We're about to dive into our busy season at Think Chinatown with our block parties, with our Chinatown night markets. So I hope to see you all very soon. Thanks so much for having me. And I think we're opening it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I know there's been a lot of thoughts and activity in the chat. So I'll let you call on people, or if you want to let us know if you want people to put questions in the chat or unmute themselves or raise their hands or.
Yeah. Yeah. If folks have questions that they want to ask, feel free to unmute yourselves. I am not super, I'm sorry, 3 years in, I'm still super not familiar with Zoom. But if you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat, or show me your face, show me your voice. I'm here.
There is one question in the chat I might just read out to you. It's kind of buried by now. So Joan asked, when we develop our listening and interviewing skills so that our parents open up to reveal personal trauma, they/we become less likely to share. How do you approach those concerns within your community?
Yeah, that's something that I continue to think about, especially, I think a lot of the, especially with the music, it feels like, an easy entry point into these bigger stories, these bigger conversations. And so for me, a lot of the times I think that the prep work long before you get to the interview is the most important part, not only for yourself as the interviewer, but also for the person that you are interviewing. Something that is really important to me is letting folks know ahead of time, okay, this is what's going to happen. I want folks to know the full process of the interview so that they can decide for themselves what they want to share, how they want to share it. And so they know where it's going to go. And it also gives folks the options of, like, if you need to take a pause, if you don't feel like sharing a particular thing, if I ask a question that you don't want to answer, this is totally your choice. I'm not here to push you. And it's also the after part too. After the conversation, how are you continuing to show up for the person that you're talking to? How are you taking care of them, not just as your interviewer, but as someone that you love? And so that's something that I really hold strongly in my oral history work, is that we shouldn't be approaching our storytellers just as our storytellers, but we should be treating them as people that we really love and we care about. And so if I am being expected to share a sad, traumatic story, what would I need to feel safe, to feel brave, and give that back to the folks that you're bringing in to share stories. And so for me, it's not just about during the interview, it's before, after, it's that relationship, that building of trust, that shows that you are here to really walk through this together, and you're not just going to disappear after they share a traumatic story.
There's some other questions in the chat. Bridget says, thank you for this talk. I'm so curious about your background and experience before you started doing the project you shared with us today. What brought you to this work?
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about my life before this. My life before this was in social work. And I think that actually inspired a lot of this work, because when I was doing social work, so to be more specific, I was working specifically with sexual assault survivors and domestic violence survivors. And a lot of my work as a case manager was after somebody is experiencing this horrible traumatic thing, how are we connecting folks to what they need? How are we maintaining a relationship with them to make sure that they are taken care, like that there's somebody that's taking care of them, and and supporting them throughout this healing process. And honestly, so much of what I was told to do as a case manager was okay, fill out this paperwork, direct them to the services, and that is what you need to do. And I think for me, that totally burned me out, that these were the only solutions, that it was, you just follow the books, and there were no other ways of healing that were being integrated into our work. And so I think what this taught me in kind of a spirally way is that there must be other ways towards healing. There must be other ways to connect and care for and support people in this process. And from this process and from the case management work, I was really learning that it's not just about that thing that you do right after the event. It's that long-term healing process. How are you still supporting folks all throughout that course of the healing process, and not just expecting them to be healed right after because you've directed them to services. And so even though it doesn't exactly translate to doing oral history work, I did learn a lot of that, building long-term relationships, building trust, that really informs the oral history work that I do today. I'm seeing another question in here from Stephanie saying, Think Chinatown sounds like such an amazing community. It is. How long did it take to build this kind of community of artists and collaborators? It's an ongoing process. I'm continuing to deepen my relationships with the folks around me. It definitely helps that I live here in the neighborhood, that folks see me all the time, that I show up to people's different events, to dinners. And so particularly for these projects, it didn't just start with, me coming in as a storytelling lead. This work had been happening for a really long time. And what I love about Think Chinatown is that the group didn't just start out of nowhere. It's actually housed under its parent organization called Create in Chinatown, which was founded in the post 9/11 recovery here in Manhattan's Chinatown. And so that group has been organizing in the neighborhood for decades. And so and even before post 9/11 recovery. And so the work, when Think Chinatown came in, it was building off of those connections, those relationships, that work that had already been happening. And so this work was happening long before 2016, long before Think Chinatown even existed. And it's building on this legacy, not only of the folks at Create in Chinatown who were building these relationships, but also the people who were part of Basement Workshop, being a part of our work. And I think for me, a lot of the relationship building work is being here in the neighborhood. It's showing up for people. It's being excited and celebrating all the things that folks are working on, and also being part of the spaces where we are grieving together. There's all of these different parts of the work that allow for us to actually just show up for each other. And I hope that this process never stops. I hope that we continue to build this community of artists and collaborators. And I hope that we get even more random people that are excited about our work coming to our events. I see a question from Adrian. How can we find funding resources to do this type of work? Please let me know too, because I would love to know the answer to that question. It is definitely not easy to do that. A lot of the work that we do, or a lot of the work that I've been doing, both with Chinatown Records, Think Chinatown, Self-Evident, has all been grant funded. And I think on one side, there's that funding, like the hard funding. The other side, which you can see from Chinatown Records, is like folks want to support and can support in a lot of different ways. So folks are donating their collections to me. Folks are bringing their speakers to block parties. They're coming to volunteer. And I think something that project has really taught me is that funding is amazing and we need more of that. But we also can see that folks contribute a lot of different things. They bring a lot of different experiences, excitement, and being open to seeing how folks want to contribute and trying to find room for that to fit in. I know that's exactly what Basement Workshop did. Folks would just walk in and be like, I'm an artist, I'm a singer, and here's what I want, like, how can we be a part of it? And that's the exciting part, is that folks bring a lot of different parts of their lives and experiences. And I think a bulk of the work is trying to figure out where they all fit in together. But do keep me posted if you do find those funding resources, because I'd love to know too. Am I going to be presenting something at the OHA annual meeting? I don't know. I don't think so yet, but we'll see. A question from Fanny: what have you learned about why people don't share their stories? Shame, protecting others, wanting to move on? Definitely all of the above. I think something that I've really learned, especially with a lot of the folks that I have been doing this work with, is that folks haven't, a lot of time folks don't know or haven't been clued into like the entire process of that oral history interview. So something that I've heard from a lot of folks when I was doing the research for the oral history toolkit and in all of like the oral history work that I do is folks are scared that people will take their recordings and then go off and do something crazy with them. And they will lose control of their stories and not know where it's going to go. And so something that I really, really value in my oral history work is from the very beginning, explaining to folks, where is your recording going? What are we going to do with it? Why is it important for me and for folks to hear this story? Why do we want to talk specifically to you? And really bring our narrators into that process so that they know, where is this going to go? Why are you interested in me? And it's not just about, oh, we're here to just to record a story and then we're going to leave. And I think a lot of times folks, are scared that their stories will get taken and they'll never hear from this person again and they'll never know what happened to it. And so that's what we built this oral history toolkit around, is really centering our storytellers as part of that process, as decision makers, as co-producers in this whole process, so that they can really feel like, okay, I do feel safe, I do feel brave, I do feel excited to be a part of this with you because I know what this thing is. I have a question from Adrian. So some funding resources ask for transcripts of interviews. Should we include this in the release form? I definitely think that anything that you're going to do with the interview, you should let your narrators know. And that really gives them the choice. How much do they want to share with you? How do they want to share it with you when they know exactly what's going to happen to it? Because I know sometimes, folks want to have a conversation with you, but if they don't know where it's going to go and what can be used against them or how it will be used, then they may not trust you to do the recording. And so my personal belief is that we should be completely open with our narrators, with our storytellers from the very beginning, because I'm not the only producer. The storyteller should be a co-producer with you. And so they should be able to make those decisions about their personal lives and the stories that they share with you. Do you have the toolkit of expectations written in Chinese? I wish I did. That is something that we are really trying to work on in these future iterations of the oral history program, is really getting folks to be able to well, what we want to do is really partner with organizations that are doing this kind of work, and bringing folks in to translate this toolkit so that folks can use it within their own communities. And so I think for us, that really starts with partnership building. And that's what I know that's what I've been working on over the past year, and really seeing what folks need, what folks want out of this toolkit, and what folks have already been doing with the toolkit. And hopefully in the future, we will have this toolkit in so many different languages so that folks can use it any and all ways. Let's see. I see a question from Cheyenne. I'm about to follow a band on tour and have been slotted with the documentation of their experiences. How might you suggest imbuing oral history tactics in a very different environment from the average oral history interview? I feel like a lot of my oral history work is outside of the typical oral history interview setting, and that's really where I'm trying to show it's already happening everywhere outside of the typical traditional oral history world, and actually works alongside them. So I'm not sure exactly the context of this, but like I was showing in a lot of the pieces, objects, music are always great ways to like spur memory, and showing other stories and using other stories to activate these other memories has always been really helpful for me and for folks who I have worked with in oral histories. So I would say asking about specific objects that you see like as you're touring with them. If you see that somebody is always like holding on to something right before they go on to play, like ask them why, what is that thing? And start with what you see, start with listening to the things that are happening around you, and really pay attention to those little objects and those little things that could trigger memories. I see another question. What's your favorite way of holding space for others to be comfortable, to open up organically when inviting them to share stories? I love having dinner with people. I think that one of my friends, Arlen, who was in the Yellow Pearl video, he just sent an email the other day that said, banquet tables are my home court. And I love that. I love that, you know, that is actually how I think about this oral history work, is that it starts way before you even get to the interview. It's having dinner with people. It's showing up with people. It's wanting to be there long before the recorder is even turned on. And so, and when you're showing up and showing people that you want to be there, then people will want to be there with you too. So my favorite way definitely is to have dinner, have fun, go to block parties, dance, be silly, and really be outside of this this traditional idea of like the stuffy oral history interview. There's so much fun stuff that can happen beforehand, and that's where you start to pick up the clues of what they probably want to talk about in the interviews. You start to hear these memories that then you can ask about in the interviews, and, you know, have a nice meal while you're at it. A question from Amy: how do you take care of yourself and steward your time and energy in doing this work? I am constantly learning how to do this, because as y'all see, it is a very personal part of my life. It's my family, it's music, you know. And so I think a lot of the times I am still learning how to do this. I do think that a lot of times I think that when I have conversations with people, I'm always like, this is research. And then I realize, no, I'm just having a conversation. I'm just here existing as a neighbor, as a silly girl in the neighborhood, and really allowing myself to have those moments where I'm not working. And even though it feels like my work is so deeply personal, I don't have to always be on. I can be silly, I can dance, I can have fun, I can listen to music, I can sit in my apartment and stare at my cats all day, and that is totally fine. So I think a lot of my taking care of myself is doing the things that I love, and not necessarily needing them to inform my work, but just doing them because I love them. So listening to records, finding new music, playing with my cats, going outside, dancing. I just love doing all of that. Okay. Jennifer, email me about this. I'd be happy to connect with you about it. Let's see, I think that I don't see any more questions unless other folks are feeling super excited to jump on and say hi. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for being a part of this very personal time together. And I hope that it gets y'all wanting to connect with the people around you. I hope that you start to see stories everywhere, because once you do, they'll start avalanching on you. So you better watch out. But always feel free to reach out. I am super excited always to connect with folks, to learn from y'all, because I'm constantly learning, and I love meeting new friends, because that's who makes up all of my work. And I'm really excited to stay connected with y'all. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. What a wonderful workshop. I'm so grateful to get the chance to hear about your work and see everyone's responses to it. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for being here and bringing your energy and chiming in the chat. And thank you again to the NEH for funding this and the OHA for hosting it, especially Bethany and our ASL interpreters. And Rochelle, we'll be sure to send you the chat so you can see all the love.
Yeah, I'd love that. And hi, Fanny. I see you.